Support comes from UT's Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, featuring miles of trails and nearly 900 native plant species. More about the official Botanic Garden of Texas at wildflower.org.
Well, we hear a lot about mindful living, but what exactly is that? Bianca and Michael Alexander can show you, because they are the creators and co-hosts of Conscious Living on PBS. They invite us on their journeys across the country and around the globe to enrich their lives as mindful human beings. Welcome, Bianca and Michael. How are y'all?
We're great. Thank you so much for having us. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, thank you all so much. I'm really excited to talk about, because we're always talking about plants, but I know everybody could use a nice dose of mindful living. But what is conscious living, and what is your series Conscious Living all about?
For us, conscious living, is all about honoring where the plants came from, honoring Mother Earth, right? And we both love plants. My mom was a green thumb, Michael's a green thumb, and plants are something that are worthy of protecting. And it's something that we can do by being more aware of how we're moving through the world, how we're traveling through the world, how we're being with each other. So conscious living is really about highlighting the journey towards being a more mindful human and coexisting with planet Earth in a way that supports and sustains everyone and everything, while also hopefully having a good time.
You both have multi-level busy lives, as pretty much every single person on this planet Earth right now. But what was your personal journey to come to this place, and how did you really arrive at your philosophy and lifestyle?
For us, this is really a love story. We met at a gay party in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, a trick of San Francisco natives. There's always beautiful women and no competition. And right, who knew? And then conscious living really came during our honeymoon. We were literally sitting on a beach in Bali and just felt very compelled that we wanted to create a program that was about living more mindfully, that was about really living in concert with each other and living in concert with planet Earth. How do we take care of this place that we live and also take care of each other, because they really go hand in hand. It came from that. It came from our love for each other, and it took off from there.
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is just our own journey. I'm originally from the East Coast. Michael's from San Francisco, very, progressive, tree-hugging environmentalist from, I think, the time that he, was drinking a bottle.
Yes.
And I came from a very sort of conservative, Methodist Episcopalian, Black, Southern kind of culture, which was not about hugging trees. It wasn't about being vegan. It's like we put fat back in greens, like for no reason, right? It's like, and this is just what we do after church on Sundays, what I mean? So, for me, meeting Michael, moving to California, was really an education of like, wow, I consider myself a very educated person, yet I know nothing about the planet. I know nothing about my own health. I really learned that there's a connection between what we do as consumers, the products that we put into our rivers, lakes, and streams, and on our bodies. And that's when like a light bulb went off, and I was like, I'm watching television, watching the news, reading the newspaper as an information source, and why aren't they telling me any of this stuff that I need to live more holistically? And so that really was, I think, created a passion to bring more of these stories that we don't see in mainstream television to the world. And that's where conscious living, I think the spirit of it became our life journey.
I was an environmentalist since I was a little kid. And I remember seeing Medicine Man, a movie with Sean Connery, when I was in my teens. And they said, after the movie was over, it talked about like a cure to cancer that came from the rainforest, and it said, buy an acre of rainforest, and I did, and I was a little kid. So I think, for me, what really was a key piece of this was just knowing the importance that nature played in my life, knowing the role that being able to walk in the woods, whether it's the redwoods or in the mountains or by the ocean. And, from that, I think we just naturally evolved through this process of, okay, what is the next step that we want to take?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
And it didn't look like being vegan and plant-based and travel show and all of that. It was just literally one step at a time.
Yeah, and I think it was just the journey that kind of created the path, so to speak, and the path created the journey, and just our curiosity and really our own ignorance. In many ways, we're like two of the least conscious people we know. It's like, you teach what you need to learn, and we're trying to learn how to be more mindful and more conscious. And the show has really given us a path to ask the questions, to be curious, and to learn and evolve with the information that we are sharing with our viewers at the same time.
You often combine vegan experiences with spiritual ones. And I mean, how do you work that together?
For me, I can say that part of the vegan movement is an opportunity to feel your body and feel yourself when you're not ingesting the pain, suffering, and death of other sentient beings. And initially, I used to make fun of vegetarians. I really did. And and here I am. But when I began to feel my body and feel the peace that I felt, feel the calmness that I felt, I had a greater sense of empathy towards other people, greater sense of compassion, and I was just happier.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great question, because the spiritual path, many religious practices, many mystics, many gurus, profess the benefits, like vibrationally, on a cellular level, to abstaining, from flesh, from meat. And so, in India, like, there's so many people that are vegetarian. When we traveled there, you can go to pretty much anywhere, and there's an entire menu that's dedicated to just vegan, and it's like, what? This is so easy. And it's something that I think does go hand in hand with the spiritual path, because, when your body is healthier and your mind is clearer, it does make it easier to meditate. It makes it easier to reach higher states of consciousness, and to be more open-hearted, and to be more compassionate, and to be less angry.
In the landscape design world where I live a bit, nature play is really becoming increasingly important. Children's exposure to nature has just overwhelmingly beneficial psychological and physiological components. And I love forest bathing. I just got to go ahead and throw that out there. Though I do focus on a lot of grassland restoration, I will get out there and forest bathe with the best of them. But how do intimate outdoor experiences matter really to our well-being?
I think for me, it's such an essential part of it. Part of the silence, because we're so surrounded with noise and with, bombarded with devices. Forest bathing, a piece of it is just the silence and the sound of nature, the sound of the wind going through the trees, the sound of the crickets, or the frogs, or just the sound of nothing is such a powerful place to be, especially when after you've been bombarded by all this energy. For me, that piece is such an essential part of it, and the best place to find it is in nature. That's one of the things that many spiritual paths talk about, is just that power of silence. Be still and know that I am God. You can actually begin to connect to that voice within when the stillness comes, when that silence comes.
Yeah, and I say, if you don't believe in a higher power, God, or universe, it's like, go and watch a sunset. You know what I mean? Look at a thunderstorm. You know what I mean? Just stand in the middle of the woods and look up, right? And it's just, there's something bigger that's out there, and being in nature, I think, just makes that connection much more palpable.
Ecology is a web of life, and we are a part of that, right? So we need to plug into it. How does food and growing food fit into our conscious living?
I love growing food. It is such a rush. Even I can't tell you what it's like to snip your own kale before you make a kale salad, or just even just like green, just green onions, and putting them in a little container on your shelf, and snipping your own green onions. There's something about making your own food, growing your own food, and really understanding the journey of life that not only relaxes, like, it is such a huge part of my mindfulness practice, is growing food, getting out in the soil, getting in the dirt, and beginning to connect to this, this web of life. It's so powerful.
Yeah, in fact, we produced a wonderful story on a Zen Buddhist monastery in Northern California about the Zen of organic gardening. And of course, they are able to plant beautiful organic seeds and reap a beautiful harvest, and give that to the local farmers market, and the produce is used in beautiful plant-based cuisine in local restaurants. restaurants. But what was so fascinating about that story was the monastics and the people living there, the concept of being willing to tend the land and to take care of the ground without being attached to the fruits of your labor. Yet also being able to be a part of the manifestation of the fruits without sort of being attached to what it looks like and how much the yield is and that sort of thing. And it's really a spiritual journey. I think gardeners, you have to have a connection to sort of the broader cycles of life. It's you have to water, you have to weed the garden, you have to wait, for the rain and the sun and the wind and all the elements to come together in a way that is completely outside of your power, right? You do your part. And then you have to let go of the rest. And so for me, I think gardening is such a beautiful practice of spirituality. And then, of course, I love eating the food, which is grown with love. It tastes really good, too.
And, and as you know, as a gardener, who hasn't lost, a crop to some sort of bug or, whatever it is. And it's humbling. Because you realize, okay, I there's nothing I could do about this. This is nature. Right. This is the divine. This is that path. And inside of that pain, it's painful. When you've cultivated and you've got it, and it's and now it's gone. But inside of that pain, at least for me personally, some of my, some of the greatest freedom that I appreciate in my life, and I certainly have a long way to go, as Bianca said, we're doing our stumbling best to be conscious every day, and
we try.
Oftentimes less so.
Often fail.
As the shoot that happened about an hour ago. But inside of that, of that pain of having to sort of surrender, there is freedom. There is a freedom and a sense of, okay, there's something bigger happening, and I can surrender inside of that and know that I'll still be taken care of.
You mentioned the vegan diet. How does one follow, or how do you specifically follow a vegan diet?
It's actually easier than people think. It started out just the journey. Like I said, I grew up in the South eating fatback and greens 3 times a day.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the journey was a very slow one. Some people go cold turkey. That wasn't the case for me. I started by just detoxing with the seasons, looking at the winter, spring, summer, and fall opportunities to kind of reset, which is the cycles of gardening too. And it was when I was cleansing, in those times, I was able to be more sensitive and more aware of what I put into my body after the cleanse. And that's when I was able to slowly, season by season, remove, first it was beef and then lamb and then chicken and then fish was the last step. And I was vegetarian for 10 years before I did another detox, and then I was able to go vegan. So just slowly kind of removing things as opposed to this whole concept of cold turkey. So it's treating yourself with kindness and compassion for me was the journey, and then giving myself a space to have a clear palate to actually feel what my body felt like for 30 days without having meat and dairy. And it's I lost my pooch, the gut that I couldn't get rid of no matter how many sit-ups I did. I felt smarter, my vision cleared up. And then once I sensed that level of clarity, I was you know what? I don't think I want to put that back in. And that's what the journey was for me. And it's different for everyone.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, but I think, she's talking about baby steps. And that's really the, for a lot of people, it's going Meatless Monday. Right now, it's such a great time to go plant-based. We have a book that we wrote called The Conscious Living 10-Day Detox. And one of the things that is in that book is it's 10 days. It's the idea of, in our minds, typically, of what we have to give up, and I'm not going to give that up. I still, sometimes when I smell bacon, from time to time, like that smell. And it's
the conditioning of all those breakfasts with mom in the morning. Yeah.
Right. But I also know that when I make my vegan, plant-based sausage, with my vegan butter, and I'm able to have the little, the little burnt scraps after I make it, it gives me that same, maybe 80% or 90% of what I used to get from bacon, that same sort of feel. And so that's really what it's about, is saying that, hey, it's all baby steps, but if you're willing to take that journey and take one step and take another step, you'd be surprised what's on the other side.
I'm probably going to mispronounce this word terribly, but you've created this really inspiring segment on Feng Shui.
Feng Shui.
That's it, right? Feng Shui. I told you I was going to mess it up.
I'm sure I'm messing it up. I'm sure the proper
But that segment on your home and patio was really wonderful.
We can't take the credit. Our wonderful Feng Shui designer and interior designer, Suzanne Bank, is one who has inspired many of our spaces. We fell in love with Feng Shui just because it gives access to, the feeling when you walk into a home. In any space, you walk into an office, space, you walk into a house, you walk into a place of worship, you can immediately feel the energy of that space. And even though you can't see it, you feel it. And there's lots of tips and tricks and cures, as they call in feng shui, where you can kind of clear out the negative energy and clear the clutter. That's a big piece of it, so that there's a flow. And so feng shui is just basically about, wind and water flowing. And so anywhere that there's kind of like a blockage of energy, you're going to feel slightly stuck. So people, for example, that may be having relationship challenges or maybe financial challenges, you can build up that part of your house or that part of your room or office and maybe clear the clutter, add some crystals, maybe add a water fountain. There's a lot of different ways to kind of create the placements to create more of a flow and just a sense of well-being and energy that uplifts you, as opposed to the space taking your energy away. And that's really all feng shui does.
For me, the biggest thing about feng shui, because when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, whatever, feng shui, tomato, tomato, whatever. But it actually works. So like the first time Bianca did it, she was like, wanted a relationship and wanted to be married. And literally a couple weeks after Suzanne came and did her house, we were engaged. Crazy,
We've been
right?
dating for like a long time, and then it was just like the energy just moved.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then even the most recent time, the segment that you saw, I think we said it as a postscript, like we were, there was just two out of the blue, like incredible opportunities that came to us after 2 years of living in this house. And then we did feng shui, and literally within a couple weeks, these opportunities came. So that's the biggest thing, is like, it really works. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it works. And I want to, make sure that I keep doing it.
As a father of a 7 and 3-year-old, decluttering sounds absolutely sublime to me.
That's the start. Like, the feng shui will come once you can move through your house freely and feel good when you come in each room. And it's like, sometimes it's like letting go of the things that don't make you feel good and don't bring you joy, and then making room for things that do give you joy. And just that little practice, some people say, there's a therapist that's like, clients come to me all the time, they're depressed. The first thing I tell them to do, clean out a drawer. Just clean out one drawer. And maybe your junkiest drawer. And that can lift your mood, because you're confronting things and opening up space for something new to come in.
Sure. Y'all have done your show, in the US, but also around the world. Why did you, to me, it makes sense. It sounds like you're talking about really holistic changes, but why did you decide to just open it up to everywhere?
For us, conscious living has really just been our sort of pole star of how we're trying to live in the world. There's so many things that we do. We'll be at a spa and we'll find ourselves sipping out of an 8-ounce like plastic cup. You know what I mean? Like little plastic water bottle, and we're like, okay, here we are.
More plastic.
For us, when we go to a place, like when we went to Berlin, we landed and it's like, okay, what do we want to do? We want to eat awesome food. Yep. We want to meet cool people. We want to take part in incredible experiences. And so the show is really kind of an outgrowth of that, of us just landing at places and saying, okay, what do we want to do?
Yeah, and there's something about traveling internationally that I think can open, and really just out of your own neighborhood or your hometown, in another city, another state, if you can't get on a plane, that just opens up, our ideas of who we are or who we think we are and who we think others are. And when you sort of immerse yourself, particularly in an unknown culture, it forces you to kind of grapple with your own identity, with your own nationality, with your own race, your own religion, and realize there's people on other sides of the world that are doing things completely different, and they're perfectly content, right? So who am I to say that my way of doing things is any better than yours? And it just kind of opens up a sense of, I think, brotherly love and unity, to realize, despite the fact that we have different skin colors, different genders, different, religions, there is a universal commonality. We all want to live well and, be seen and find people that support us and have a good time and eat good food and, just be happy and healthy. And there's something very connecting about that. So traveling for, I think, both of us has actually helped us to appreciate, being back home even more, because we find a part of ourselves that, is in everyone else on the planet.
How can folks watch and follow and connect with y'all to follow you even further on y'all's journey?
Well, obviously PBS Austin.
Watch the show.
You can watch the show on PBS Austin, and we love Austin. We can't wait to shoot a show there.
Yes.
In coming seasons. On social media, we're at Conscious Living TV on Instagram and Facebook, or Conscious TV on Twitter. And then our website, consciouslivingtv.com. And you can stream us anytime on the PBS app. So that's fun as well.
I just want to say, Bianca and Michael, this has been a really wonderful conversation. And I know that a lot of people are concerned about their impact. And I really appreciate the way that y'all have really looked at it in a deep and meaningful exploration of what it means to be here on this little blue dot for a little while. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and we will hopefully see you soon.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, we can travel the world, have fun, and do it with a minimal carbon footprint. It is possible.
Yeah. And next time we'll do it in Austin.
Yeah.
At one of your gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah? Deal?
Sounds wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.